The room fell into a silence so heavy it felt like it might crush the lungs of everyone inside. A single tear rolled down the weathered face of the retired SEAL Admiral as he stared at the thin man standing across from him, dressed in a faded janitor's uniform. His voice trembled as he whispered, "Please see broken bar, just make it fast." In that moment, no one in the hospital hallway could have imagined that the next few minutes would change their lives forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the hidden strength inside ordinary people, please take a second to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more emotional, life-changing stories to you. The hospital wing was old, built decades ago for wounded soldiers and later converted into a civilian trauma center. Its walls carried stories of pain, survival, and quiet courage. The scent of antiseptic mixed with stale coffee drifted through the air, while fluorescent lights flickered faintly overhead. Nurses hurried past, doctors whispered behind curtains, and families waited in tense clusters, praying for miracles. In the middle of it all sat Admiral Richard Harlan, a man who had once commanded thousands, now reduced to a frail figure in a wheelchair, wrapped in a thin blanket, his breath shallow and uneven. Years of service in the most dangerous corners of the world had left scars on his body and soul, but none as cruel as the illness now consuming him. The doctors had given him weeks, maybe days, and his only wish was to leave this world with dignity, without prolonged suffering. Across from him stood Daniel Reyes, a single father and night shift janitor, clutching a mop handle with trembling hands. His uniform was worn, the fabric thinned at the elbows, the name tag scratched and barely legible. Dark circles framed his tired eyes, and his shoulders sagged under a weight no one could see. By day, he struggled to raise his 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, in a tiny apartment that barely kept out the cold. By night, he cleaned hospital floors, emptied trash cans, and scrubbed blood from tiles, all while fighting the quiet fear that one unexpected bill could shatter the fragile balance of their lives. Daniel had not meant to be here. He was only covering an extra shift, hoping the overtime pay might help him replace Sophia's broken glasses. But fate had a way of placing people exactly where they were meant to be. Earlier that evening, a frantic nurse had rushed toward him, mistaking his calm demeanor for medical authority, begging him to help. A patient in the restricted wing was having a severe reaction, and no specialists were immediately available. In the confusion, Daniel had followed her, stepping into a world he had kept buried for years. As he entered the room, Admiral Harlan's eyes had locked onto him with sharp recognition. Beneath the frailty, the Admiral's gaze still carried the piercing intensity of a man trained to read danger in a heartbeat. Slowly, he had straightened, his voice weak but firm, calling Daniel by a name he had not heard in nearly a decade. That single word had struck Daniel like a thunderclap, ripping open memories he had sealed away. Grueling training sessions, roaring helicopter blades, salt water churning beneath midnight skies, and brothers in arms who never made it home. Years ago, Daniel had been one of the youngest operatives in a classified SEAL medical response unit, trained to perform emergency procedures in the most hostile environments imaginable. His hands had once saved lives under fire, stitching wounds in darkness, stabilizing soldiers while bullets cracked overhead. But after a mission gone wrong, after a decision that haunted his dreams, he had walked away from it all. Disappearing into anonymity, he chose the quiet life of a janitor, believing that by fading into the background, he could protect his daughter from the shadows of his past. Now, standing in that sterile hospital room, Daniel felt the walls closing in. The Admiral, barely able to breathe, had asked him for a final mercy. The illness attacking Harlan's nervous system caused relentless pain, and despite the best efforts of the doctors, there was no relief. His final request was simple, a swift end. To Daniel, the plea sounded less like despair and more like trust. Trust in a man he remembered as calm under fire, steady when chaos reigned. Daniel's chest tightened as memories surged. He remembered the Admiral pulling him from wreckage after an explosion, whispering encouragement while blood soaked his uniform. He remembered nights spent planning impossible rescues, and mornings mourning the fallen. He remembered the oath they had all taken, to protect life, no matter the cost. The conflict tore through him, a battle between compassion and duty, between mercy and hope. But as Daniel looked at the frail man before him, something shifted. He saw not a legend, not a decorated officer, but a human being, frightened and exhausted, clinging to the last shred of control. Slowly, Daniel removed his jacket, folding it carefully and placing it on a nearby chair. Beneath it, scars traced his arms like a road map of past battles. His hands, though worn, were steady. In that moment, the janitor vanished, and the trained medic returned. Instead of granting the Admiral's request, Daniel began to work. He spoke calmly, explaining that he had seen similar symptoms before, in a classified operation overseas. A rare complication, often misdiagnosed, but sometimes reversible if treated aggressively and immediately. The medical staff hesitated, uncertain whether to trust a man with no visible credentials. But the conviction in Daniel's voice, the precision of his movements, and the desperate situation left them with little choice. Over the next several hours, the hospital room transformed into a battlefield of its own. Monitors beeped in frantic rhythms, 4 lines multiplied, and nurses followed Daniel's rapid instructions. He adjusted medications, guided procedures, and applied techniques learned in places where failure meant death. Sweat poured down his face as he fought against time, exhaustion, and doubt. Every second felt like an eternity, and every shallow breath from the Admiral tightened the knot in his chest. Outside the room, the night deepened. Rain streaked the windows, mirroring the tension inside. Daniel's thoughts flickered to Sophia, asleep in their tiny apartment, clutching her worn teddy bear. He imagined her laughter, her stubborn courage, her faith in him. He could not fail. Not here. Not now. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the Admiral's vitals began to stabilize. His breathing eased, his pulse steadied, and color returned to his pale skin. The room exhaled as one, nurses exchanging stunned glances. Hours later, as dawn painted the sky in soft hues of gold and pink, the crisis had passed. Admiral Harlan slept peacefully, no longer writhing in agony. Word of the miracle spread quickly through the hospital. Doctors gathered, reviewing charts, marveling at the unconventional approach that had saved a life. When the Admiral finally awoke, his first request was to see Daniel. The reunion was quiet, heavy with unspoken gratitude. The Admiral reached out, gripping Daniel's hand with surprising strength, his eyes shining with tears. In that moment, the past seemed to dissolve, leaving only respect, forgiveness, and hope. News of the incident traveled beyond the hospital walls, eventually reaching military circles and media outlets. Offers of recognition, awards, and even reinstatement poured in. But Daniel hesitated. His life was no longer defined by medals or missions. It was shaped by bedtime stories, school lunches, and the soft whisper of "I love you, Daddy" at the end of each day. Yet the story did not end there. The hospital, recognizing Daniel's extraordinary skill, offered him a position as a full-time emergency medical technician, complete with training, benefits, and a salary that could finally lift his family out of poverty. For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to imagine a future not ruled by fear and survival, but by stability and purpose. On his first day in his new role, Daniel arrived early, nervous and hopeful. He wore a clean uniform, his posture straighter than it had been in years. As he walked through the corridors, he noticed small changes, a fresh coat of paint, new equipment, a sense of renewal. He felt it within himself, to a quiet rebirth. That evening, he picked up Sophia from school. When he told her about his new job, her eyes widened with pride. She threw her arms around his neck, laughing, telling everyone within earshot that her daddy was a hero. Daniel blinked back tears, realizing that sometimes, the greatest victories were not won in battle, but in moments of simple joy. Weeks later, Admiral Harlan, now recovering steadily, visited Daniel's modest apartment. He brought with him a framed photograph from years past, showing a younger Daniel standing among his teammates, eyes bright, spirit unbroken. They spoke of loss, resilience, and the strange ways life circles back on itself. Before leaving, the Admiral pressed a sealed envelope into Daniel's hand, a scholarship fund for Sophia's future, a gift of gratitude and belief. Life did not suddenly become perfect. There were still long shifts, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. But something fundamental had changed. Daniel no longer hid from his past, he embraced it, allowing it to strengthen, not define, him. And Sophia, watching her father step into the light, learned that courage could be quiet, and heroes could wear janitor's uniforms. As the seasons changed, Daniel became a trusted presence in the emergency department, known for his calm under pressure and unwavering compassion. Patients often mistook him for a doctor, and he would smile gently, correcting them. He never sought recognition, only the chance to help. In every life he touched, a piece of his own heart healed. Years later, when Sophia stood on a graduation stage, Daniel sat in the front row, his eyes shining with pride. He thought back to that night in the hospital, to the plea that had nearly broken him, and to the choice that had saved them both. In that single moment of courage, 2 lives had been rewritten. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means more than you know and helps us continue sharing stories that remind us of the power of kindness and second chances. And before the story ends, we have a special request for you. Please comment the word hope below if you believe that even in our darkest moments, a single act of compassion can change everything. Because sometimes, the quietest people carry the greatest strength, and the simplest choices can echo across a lifetime.